drawing after I've finished with the instructions. So try to become now Captain Kirk and self-observe what's happening in your own brain. So listen to me just for the instructions. First, I want you to take your pencil. Left-handers do use the opposite side. It's so you won't be covering it. To take your pencil and redraw the profile that's shown in this visual illusion drawing, which can be seen either as two profiles or as a symmetrical base inside. So your pencil will come along the line and you'll be saying what you're drawing as you draw. Like this: forehead, nose, upper lip, lower lip, chin, and neck. You could go back a second time, really thinking what those terms mean. Forehead, nose, upper lip, lower lip, chin, and neck. At that point, go to the other side and begin to draw the facing profile, which will complete this symmetrical vase in the center. When you get about here, somewhere here on the profile, you may begin to sense in your own mind some sense of conflict or confusion. And the purpose of this exercise is for you to self-observe. How do you solve the problem? Okay, now with that comment, let's take about 3 or 4 minutes to do that. Try to self-observe. You now step outside yourself as Captain Kirk and watch. You take another 60 seconds. Okay, it sounds as though most of you have finished, and I'd like to see hands. How many of you did, in fact, experience some conflict or confusion when you did this? It's amazing, isn't it? Let me ask you now, did anyone in this room experience paralysis? You know, where you really didn't know which way to go? Anyone at all? Did you? No kidding, really? And what happened on that? I'll repeat what she says. What happened on that?
Well, I think I was looking at this line here, and when the nose went that way, I wanted to go this way.
You wanted to go the same direction. How did you solve? She wanted to go the same direction out for the second note. How did you solve that? You just forced yourself to look at the other side?
No, I quit looking at that side and said, no, it's supposed to go that way.
Okay. And did you get a symmetrical vase then?
Pretty much.
Okay, good. Okay, so she just sort of put out of her mind what that nose looked like and drew this one, and that worked for her. Anyone else? Let's take one more answer on this. Who had any paralysis? Or yes, please.
I was going to talk myself out of it.
You talked yourself out of it. How?
Well, I said, nope, you got to go the other way.
She
I
said
that to myself.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's Captain Kirk talking. She said, I said to myself I had to go the other way. And that worked for you then? Working means getting a symmetrical vase on the inside. Yes. It's almost not thinking about it. Now, this is interesting also. So you say to yourself, don't think.
Right.
Don't think. Right. And you just deal what with this comes in and this goes out, and so this is good right hemisphere solution to. Now John.
I think I used memory. I would get confused, so I would just look at it and then just draw out from memory.
John is saying that he would start drawing, get confused, and then try to conjure up the memory of it, what it looked like, and do it that. Did you get a symmetrical vase then? It's so, right. Now, if you're self-observant with your Captain Kirk, you probably notice that the words were interfering. For example, nose, forehead, and so on. And one solution is to say to yourself, don't think about forehead, nose, and so on. Is that what you did? Okay, now it's that kind of conscious decision that enables you to solve this problem. I'll explain why this works. I think this exercise is very effective at illustrating this possibility of conflict. And the reason it works, I think, is that the instructions now plug in very strongly L mode, language mode. I say, now really think about what these terms mean. And so left hemisphere loves to do this, jumps into the task, and then I give you a task which can only be accomplished visually, spatially, perceptually, and really, in other words, using the capabilities of the right hemisphere. And most people come to a crunch like this and have to kind of crunch themselves from L mode into some kind of spatial mode. Yes?
I have a question about like geometry.
Yes.
Visual
Yeah.
geometric problem.
Yes.
Where, now this right brain thing, I could continue and finish it. But in geometry, if I could not visually understand it, I shut down and I peaked and I never progressed beyond a certain stage.
Okay.
Now, why is that?
Well, the question is about geometry, and this person said that she got to a certain stage with it and she just could not progress with it. Geometry is one area that requires strong right hemisphere participation in order to understand it. And many geometry classes are taught in verbal ways, so that you get in those classes the same crunch that people felt here, like paralysis, right? Exactly. And it's well known. In fact, Roger Sperry himself wrote a paper on geometry that it requires right hemisphere. So teachers now also have got to be aware of what subjects require what particular mode of presentation.
So there is hope for me if I had
Definitely, right. She said, there is hope for me. Yes, you need to find someone who will explain it to you visually, spatially, you see. It's maddening. I know, I've had such classes. Okay, any other questions now or on any of the other points I've made? Okay, we'll carry on then. In terms of looking at things differently and creatively, these little visual illusion drawings, I think, are very useful. Now, you may know this one, which is quite familiar, but this, I think, is the creative process. I say to you that this image can be seen with equal validity either as a duck or a rabbit. I have now presented you with a question. You will saturate your mind. You will come up with the aha. If you've seen one image, you will be searching for the other, either as a duck or a rabbit. I'm going to change it. It's excruciating. Okay, have you seen them both? Okay, good. Let's up the ante. This image can be seen with equal validity either as a young girl glancing back over her shoulder, or as an old hag with her chin sunk into her collar. Now, watch your mind as you seek. Okay, and you notice how you love to play this game. This is what the brain loves to do. But until the aha comes, and we'll hear the ahas. Okay, keep going. Someone in front cannot see the second image yet. Okay, now you're in saturation. You see people just staring at the thing like this. Saturation, and the aha will come. Okay, I think I better point this way. Okay, here's the young girl. This is the cheekbone, the jawbone, the ear, bit of the eye. She's wearing a necklace. and a feathered headdress. Here's the old hag. This is unfortunately known as the wife mistress drawing. This is the old hag. This is the nose. These are the eyes. Thank heavens. The mouth. Has everyone seen it? I hope so. Okay, I'm changing it. Okay. When I wrote my second book, I felt constrained to do a husband-lover, which you see here. Mine is not quite as good as the original drawing, which was done in 1922 by a psychologist named Jastrow. They're very hard to do, these drawings. Two ways of seeing. One, symbolic, analytic, and L mode, and the other, dealing with the actual thing. What the right hemisphere, I think, is specialized for is confronting reality, to see at last what is out there right in front of the eyes, as opposed to the symbolic processing. And again, I think that incident in Los Angeles of the beating of Rodney King is a wonderful example of what happens when the person, right hemisphere, I think, is required by its processing, cannot escape the confrontation with reality. It sees with its own eyes. Whereas the left hemisphere, one of the largest functions of the left hemisphere, so it seems, is to explain things away. Right hemisphere does not have language to do that, must confront what it sees with its own eyes. And to read the policeman's account of what happened, is to hear the left hemisphere version as opposed to the right hemisphere confrontation with reality. It's a very interesting example, a very unfortunate but interesting example. This is a left hemisphere joke. The woman is saying, "I'm leaving out the cows, there are just too many of them." Left hemisphere tends to abstract, to simplify, and to symbolize. This is an art joke. This is how to draw geometric shapes by starting. This is priceless. And this is the situation that we confront as teachers all the time. The guy behind the desk with the club is saying, that should take care of any more brilliant ideas emanating from the right hemisphere of your brain. Now, our job is to bring that person behind the desk into the fold, so to speak, to try to help him, usually it's him, to escape from the grip of the left hemisphere, and in Arietti's terms, to entertain ideas that may seem off the wall or unlikely or risky or whatever. We need to help these people, really. I hope we have some administrators, superintendents, principals here with us tonight, because these are the people who I think more than any of us need to take Arietti's suggestions to heart and to be heartened by Arietti's suggestions. Now, how do we do this? Not by confrontation. It does not work. It really does. That club will come down, believe me. But more by, just for example, I would love to have a whole group of superintendents, principals, and Board of Education members in a 5-day seminar and just teach them how to draw. I think this would be an interesting experience for me as well as perhaps for them, to see what the effect of this training can have. I mean, that sounds very patronized. I don't mean it, and many of our supervisors and principals are so much on our side in terms of all of this. But the trend across the country, I'm afraid, is back to basics. More discipline, line those kids up, just get that stuff into them, force them to read, and so on. Now, you and I are dealing with a generation that has born and bred on television. This is a visual brain. This is a different brain from the brain of even my children, generation of my children, certainly from my generation. This is a different brain that we are confronting these days. More visual, reared on MTV, rapidly changing images. To try to get these kids to stick with the rules of grammar, are you kidding? This is hard. Now, we have come then to the nitty-gritty of my presentation, which is the question, okay, all that sounds great, how do we do that? And this is the strategy that I and my staff go around demonstrating. And it can be stated in a single sentence. Again, using Captain Kirk to control shifts between mode, the strategy is, in order to gain access to that subdominant, that fragile and somewhat ephemeral state of consciousness, it is necessary to present your own brain with a job that your L mode, that Mr. Spock, will turn down. Now the message there is, it's no good going up against strong verbal, logical. It's got all of language at its disposal. It's no good going up against that and saying, now I want to draw now, so you get out of it. Left hemisphere will say, I can draw. Here it is. Da, da, da. Chrysanthemum, here it is. It's quick and easy. That'll do it. And so on. So we need to find another way. Now, left hemisphere, I have to say, is amenable to being tricked out of a task. As we all know, that this is the key to it. So you present your own brain with a job that the left hemisphere will turn down. That doesn't fit words, like freeway driving. You see, freeway driving, left hemisphere would have to talk its way through it. Now the Cadillac is approaching at 50 miles per hour. Now the Dodge is... As you can see, by the time you get those words strung out, the situation's changed. The information's no good. So left hemisphere cannot keep up. The L mode is quite slow compared to the instantaneousness of the right hemisphere. And therefore, I think L mode says, well, it won't say I can't drive. It lies most of the time. It's always lying. It says, in effect, I don't like to drive. We'll let old stupid do this. Drops out. And you enter that state, which is very pleasurable, actually, as anyone who draws knows. This is a great state to be in, where you are fully alert, focused on a task, you feel confident, you feel you're up to the task. It isn't that you're enjoying what you're doing. You and the thing you're doing it's all one. This is a wonderful state to be in. And in fact, it's so wonderful. I think that one of the reasons L mode, which dominates 90% of the time and is reluctant to give up its dominance, that L mode is afraid if you get over there long enough, you won't come back. But of course, that's not true. The state is extremely fragile. Now, in your packet, you have this upside-down drawing, and if there's anyone in this room who thinks he or she cannot draw, could never learn to draw, I urge you to try this exercise. To turn the drawing upside down, and to make a copy of the drawing, your drawing also upside down. Now, this, for reasons that are unclear, upside down it has a powerful effect on the left hemisphere. Apparently, it just will not deal with upside down information. Says, in effect, I don't do upside down. I find it hard to know what I'm doing, and the world isn't that way. It doesn't generalize. And so if you're going to do that, I'm out of it. Well, terrific, just what we want. And we've used this exercise. I'm sure that teachers in the group have also, and it has the most stunning effect. Really, I'll show you an example. This student misunderstood the instructions, did this drawing right side up. Well, you can hear all the symbolic chatter, this guy's sitting in a chair, I've got that, and he's wearing eyeglasses, I've got a symbol for eyeglasses, and we'll just leave the hands off because hands are too hard to draw anyway, and it doesn't matter, and so on. So this kid came in the next day, a college student, and he did this drawing upside down. So now there's no way you can go from here to here in one day. So one must then say that something has occurred, that some function in the brain has been accessed that was there all the time, if we could gain access to it. Now this, if you think of how this applies in other areas, right hemisphere is there all the time when you're trying to creatively solve a problem. But left hemisphere yaks away and says, now I'll tell you what, we'll do what we've always done. And the first step is this, and so on and so on. Right hemisphere is over here without language and cannot communicate what it wants to say. So this system is there. The key is to access it. How do you access it? You present your brain, you become Captain Kirk, you present your brain with a job that your left hemisphere will turn down. Now this is the basis of all of my work, this single idea of presenting one's brain with a job that the language system will turn down. So we have off the wall. Now next I'm going to run through a set of before and after drawings. This one, as you see, goes back to 74. This was the first set I ever kept. I'm very fond of this set, because these two drawings were of the same person. The model was the same, and this was a year later. This is the symbolic answer. Left hemisphere says, in effect, right, we'll start with the eyes, and we'll use the eyes we've always used, ever since childhood. And so this is the right hemisphere answer, and the difference here is a difference in relationships and in complexity. Now, one of the key points is that right hemisphere can deal with complexity of untold nature. Left hemisphere arrives at a certain level of complexity, just will not deal above a certain level. So complexity is a great part of this. This, again, a college student, non-art major, the symbolic answer, a portrait. This is the about mid-semester drawing of a fellow student. An engineering student, a pretty good sense of proportion, but again, this simplified and somewhat masked drawing. A self-portrait by the same student done about 12 weeks later. This is a drawing by a 35-year-old lawyer. Lawyers are the worst. Absolutely. It's drawing on about age level 5 or 6. But he did very well. This was done 5 weeks later in a UCLA class. Another non-art major, again, the symbolic forms coming out of childhood. And the self-portrait, this was an accounting student. Most of our students are non-art majors. Self-portrait. One of the art majors, drawing pretty well, actually, as you can see, about high school level. And these students also vastly improved their perceptual skills. And this wonderful example of a conceptual symbolic drawing. which of course as art teachers we all love this drawing. But I think the key point is the student didn't. He said, I've been doing this drawing since junior high school. I'm sick of it. I don't even think it's funny anymore, he said. So he did this really marvelous self-portrait. And you notice that the personality comes through of the student. So we are teaching these same skills now in 5 days. The semester class has now been collapsed down into a 5-day seminar that we do around the country, where we work 8 hours a day for 5 days. And this was an art teacher who came in with quite good skills, as you can see, but she was stuck at this level, this kind of stylized level, and wanted to go deeper in her drawing, and which she did, I believe. And this was a self-portrait that she did a couple of weeks after the class was over and sent to me, which she said she finally felt that she had grasped what she wanted. And this very funny drawing by a 38-year-old New York writer who had never drawn before. And this was a drawing one of our teachers, Linda Greenberg, and Tony Schwartz brought this drawing up to me the first day, and he was thrilled. He said, "This is the best drawing I've ever done." He said, "You've helped me," he said. So this was Tony Schwartz's self-portrait, done just 5 days later. And if we look at these two drawings together and know that only 5 days have elapsed now, and what looks to be almost the work of two entirely different individuals, actually, is the work of one person. But this is the symbolic system memorized in childhood, stuck in the brain, that is brought into play, left hemisphere dominating, says, here it is, we'll do it the way we've always done it, and so on. The second set is the dealing with the thing out there as it really is. I think one of the advantages of learning to draw is that it unlocks visual information that often is never seen unless you draw. And that's very thrilling. Now, what are we teaching in those 5 days? We're teaching a set of 5 skills only. As it turns out, drawing as a global skill encompasses only 5 components, and this is why we can do this so readily. So we're teaching the perception of edges. These are listed, I think, on the handout. The perception of edges. This is not new learning. This is already plugged in. The perception of spaces is new learning for most of our students, taught through the old method of negative space. Perception of relationships is new learning, and very, I think, significant learning. This is the hardest. Proportion and perspective. Dealing with paradoxical information is very, very difficult and mind-bendingly complicated. But the students learn it. We've developed some new ways of doing this. Perception of lights and shadows, new learning, probably new pathways in the brain. So this is what we're teaching through these methods. And this 5th skill, this so-called perception of the Gestalt, for want of a better term, I have called the perception of the thing itself, the person, if it's a portrait, this room and everything in it, this podium, whatever it is. We don't teach at all. That is, we talk about it with the students, but this is something that seems to occur in our students as a result of learning those 4 components, perceptual skills. We do not teach drawing skills at all, not at all. We teach perception, how to see what's already out there, right in front of your eyes, all the time. Anyway, if you can see it. Now, does this mean that one is always confronting complex and complex reality all the? No, not at all. What was it Matisse said? He was asked by a reporter, when you look at a tomato, do you see it as an artist sees it always? And Matisse, it is reported, said, no, he said, when I'm not working, I see it like a tomato, just as a tomato to be eaten or whatever. But when I draw it, then I see it. Now, anyone who draws knows what that difference is. To see, I think, to see at last, to part that curtain, which is a verbal curtain of naming things, to part that curtain even for a short moment, even for 10 minutes of drawing, to see a chrysanthemum, to really see it, to see a person's face, to see how beautiful a piece of crumpled up paper or an old shoe, to see how beautiful these things are, is quite a mystical experience. Yeah, I'm not a very mystical person, but I know that that is a moving experience, very difficult to describe for people outside of our field, I think. I think people have this with music. Great musicians hear things that we don't hear. But this experience of seeing at last, I think, is an experience that our students should not be deprived of. And I don't think it can be done in quick, symbolic, abstract work. I think that human beings, for whatever reason, long to break through, to see. And it is in drawing that one sees. As Frederick Frank, a great art teacher, said, that which I have not drawn, I have not seen. And it's true. It really is true. I've had this experience over and over and over again myself. Know someone for years, and then you draw that person, then at last you see that person. For the first time, actually. It's an amazing experience. And this is, I think, what we give our students. What you are giving your students is that experience. Connecting again with the world. Now, these are examples of the contour drawing. How does this fit that model I gave you? Well, we got our students to draw perhaps complex wrinkles in the hand or whatever. And I think this bores the left hemisphere out of the job. Says, in effect, this is a pointless exercise and I won't do it. Terrific. Just what we want. And the next drawing out, the student does a complex drawing of the hand. Now, we're now plugging in a little negative space and a little sighting as we go along. Next, negative space. Left hemisphere, I think, finding you gazing at empty space, and empty space says, in effect, I do not deal with nothing. I can't name it, it doesn't generalize, it's not useful to me. Left hemisphere's thing is to name and categorize. Deal with spaces, it will drop out. This is a really effective way. Again, fitting that strategy of confronting one's own brain with a task that the left hemisphere will turn down. Seen here in the profile portrait. Negative space, we have our students draw the whole room and everyone in it by negative space. We come to sighting then. Let's see if I can focus this. I guess that's the best. In which students now are citing angles and proportions relative to each other. Now, how does this work? I think the left hemisphere will not deal with paradox. Those of you who had trouble seeing both the rabbit and the duck, or the old woman and the young woman, left hemisphere lands on something, says, it's a duck. Don't tell me it's a rabbit because I've already said it's a duck. In this kind of drawing, says in effect, don't tell me that ceiling goes off at those funny angles because I know it's flat. And you better draw it flat so it will be right. and so on. Don't tell me that those doors change size, because I know they're all the same, and so on. So the student now is confronting what is known with what is hitting the retina. And this causes tremendous conflicts. I'm sure, are you having problems with sighting? This is the hardest. And we're now using drawing on glass, on a piece of plastic, which is really works. Foreshortening, it presents paradoxical information. Left hemisphere will not deal with it. But right hemisphere, because it is gullible, because it sees what's there and cannot counter it with language, just accepts it. Now, I'm sure that I'm hoping at least that you are extrapolating as I go along into how this affects creative problem solving, you see. Because if you can extrapolate from given information, you're a leap ahead. Left hemisphere comes to missing information and comes to a screeching halt. This shows up in checkbook balancing. Right hemisphere can extrapolate from the given information and arrive at a good guess as to what was there. Mind you, we don't want the right hemisphere doing checkbook balancing. We do not want creative checkbook balancing. So this is training in the perception of relationships, I think, is really terrific training. In lights and shadows, new learning, because this does not fit the stereotypic symbolic images. Shown upside down, you can see how far away these lights and shadows are from symbolic forms. One must see freshly what's really out there in terms of the lights and shadows. This is new learning. And again, we teach our students to extrapolate from what is seen to what is not seen. The next drawing out is a profile drawing. We focus on portraits because students think it's the hardest. Drawing is always the same task, always requiring the same skills. Another of the profile portraits. And then I want to run through this very lastly. We'll take a few minutes for questions. Where do those symbols come from? They come out of childhood, and we all developed our set of symbols. We developed a landscape. Perhaps you remember your landscape. Kids certainly do, and really very old people can recall their childhood landscape. We developed, each of us, a set of symbols which we liked. We landed on this brand. For this child, each of these eyes are the same, used over here for the cat's eyes. This little loopy hand is used on each of the figures. Over here becomes the cat's paws. So these symbols are like the alphabet itself, like letters which make up words. And by combining and recombining this sort of canned set of symbols, a child can draw anything. And a child's drawings become known to the teacher and the fellow students as that child's set of symbols. This is shown in this next cartoon where the teacher is saying, "You must be Billy's parents. I'd recognize you anywhere." This is probably our best cartoon. Now the set of symbols was pleasing to children for a period of time and then discarded. This junior high school drawing is typical of what kids try to do. They do cartooning because cartooning is a more sophisticated set of symbols. And you'll notice here that this student is doing the nose in foreshortening, is working it with a little bit of light shadow, shading, they call it, students call it, and so on. And they will continue drawing. Mark Kunster's book on cartooning, is quite helpful in helping kids to continue drawing through junior high school. But if they are taught how to really draw, that is, to produce an accurate and realistic drawing, they will go on drawing forever. If not, like the student Steve Goldberger with the hat, they'll give it up. They get tired of it. And it doesn't satisfy whatever that urge is to be able to set down one's perceptions. Cartooning doesn't satisfy it. For some reason. For most of us, it doesn't. Students they talk about this. I want to make things look real, they say. I want them to look as though they're 3D. They go back in space. I want it fully detailed. And we as art teachers, I think, have to accept that and to meet that need so that they can then continue to develop their artwork, their creative artwork. So we have in the language then ways of applying this. We talk about the connection to creativity and with phrases such as seeing the forest for the trees and so on. And we now need to finally turn our teaching to the problem of transfer, to teach kids to see the edges of problems. Where does one thing end and another thing start? The edges are very important in problem solving. To see the spaces of a problem. The Japanese have very good ways of dealing with what they call the space between. They've got two things out here, and they don't deal with the objects. They deal with the space between. To deal with the relationships of a problem, how big is this compared to that? What are the constants of this problem? And there are always constants. For the artist, it's vertical and horizontal. In problem solving, it could be time, which is a constant. Could be money. It could be the rules, the written down rules, and so on. There are constants. Then to see the lights and shadows of a problem. What is in the light now that you can see, and what is in the shadow still. And can you extrapolate from what you can see into the shadow? And then finally to see the problem, to see what you're studying, not what you have decided it is in a left hemisphere way, but to see it in reality. This is the key, to confront reality finally, and to be able to stand that, which is without doing a verbal number on it, to see it as Fleming saw in the Petri dish something that was different. And he didn't explain it away. He said to himself, I wonder why. So this is what you're teaching. I think this is exciting. It's an exciting time to be an art teacher. I congratulate you. You're doing a wonderful job. And I say to you, hang in there because there are better and bigger things coming down the pike. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you. We can take maybe a few minutes for questions. We could take just maybe 2 or 3 questions. I'm sorry, I've run a bit over. Yes, please.
With younger kids then, when should you begin teach them to draw so that begins to take over the symbolic type of drawings? In other words, like first grade when they're doing very symbolic, you
Okay.
start teaching some of these ways of looking at things, or when do you do that?
Okay, it's a very good question. When do you start this, and what do you do about kids' symbolic drawing, and so on? Briefly stated, symbolic drawing helps with language acquisition. You hear kids talking as that now I'm doing the house and so. Don't bother that. Just let it go. Let them do it. Encourage them. Praise them. But at the same time, down to first grade and even kindergarten, we can take our students out to really see something in the environment and to begin to try to set that down as a drawing. It could be just the negative shapes in the branches of a tree. One teacher was bringing in stuffed animals and or a bowl full of goldfish, and getting students to draw foreshortened views and so on. To confront reality, I think to do less drawing of imaginative things and more drawing of perceived objects. This is the key. It really is. So down to first grade. We do think the optimal age is about grade level 4 through about 7 to 8. The optimal age. They're dying to learn how to draw realistically. Any other questions? Yes, please. We'll take 2 more.
I'm not going to state this, but do you ever feel when you're teaching someone to draw in this manner that if they're a real naive drawer, that maybe that you're wrecking the clearness of that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, the question is, do I feel as a teacher that in teaching people to draw realistically, that that person will lose the
Because of the freshness.
and what seems to be spontaneity of the conceptual drawing, the symbolic drawings. And yes, we do worry about that. But you must remember that, as with the drawings I showed you, we may like them, but the students don't. And we, as teachers, need to meet the needs of our students, not our own needs. So we say that, it's clear from the history of art that learning how to draw never spoiled the creativity of any artist. It just never did, right into the 20th century. So learning how to draw, I think, never hurts. Just as learning how to read and write in school never bothered the creativity of the poets. And we like children's spontaneous poetry, but we do not say to them, now, we want to save that, so we're not going to teach you how to read and write. See, we don't do that. And we must take the same attitude towards these skills. We're going to give you what you want. The kids want this. We're going to teach you how to really use these functions, and then that child can go on in advanced classes. And I'm never afraid of losing the inner self. You lose the inner self when you teach techniques.
So they would come up full cycle and come to
That's right.